ponto, digamos, em que isso tudo começou? Nós tivemos, nos anos 60, a grande era do elogio da liberdade, não só nos Estados Unidos, que influenciaram o mundo inteiro, mas na Europa também. E, a partir de um determinado momento, desta liberdade, começou o sistema de controle, cada vez mais rígido, dependendo do grupo que está em foco nesse momento. O que você acha que determinou? Quer dizer, em que ponto as sociedades decidiram que havia liberdade demais e que a gente deveria legalizar esse controle dentro do sistema democrático, ou seja, nada foi alterado, não houve nenhuma revolução que afetasse a ideia de que vivemos num regime democrático. No entanto, a liberdade e o pensamento, que é o pior de tudo, quer dizer, o politicamente correto influencia diretamente a maneira como pensamos, viramos, então, para uma sociedade muito mais controlada do que imaginávamos que teríamos nos anos 60. Há uma decepção até para uma geração. Qual é o turning point?
Well, I just want to say, I think in many ways we're more free, actually. I know this sounds weird coming from me because I was just talking about how not free we are, but in the sense of democratized media, the way we interact on the internet and the information flows, we're very free to say what we want, to voice our opinions, and that part of it, I think, reminds me a little bit of something that started in the 60s. I don't think there's one key turning point because every country is different. I think in Europe, it was always more controlled. And let's remember, in the early 20th century, there was prohibition in the United States. They outlawed alcohol. It was driven by religious people at the time, not on the left, the traditional left. But I think sometime in the 70s, for many reasons, I think environmentalism is one of the leading factors to control what people do. In the United States, you can't buy certain kind of light bulbs anymore, all kinds of rules. And then the moral right, they involve themselves in speech. They think it's okay to tell you what you can see and what you can't see on television, things like that. I don't know if there's one turning point. I actually think that this sort of smiley-faced micro-fascism started in the 90s in the United States, where it was a very prosperous time. We had eliminated many of the big problems that were going on, and politicians were looking for causes, obesity, smoking, too much drinking, all the things we do that are wrong in life. And they had nothing else really going on very much, so they concentrated on that. Then 9/11 happened, and everything changed in the United States. And then, in another way, we became nannyistic in micromanaging the way we travel and the things we do, that I think is also terrible, and in a much more amplified nannyism, but it's pretty bad as well, I think.
O Lucas Santos pergunta se o excesso de tutela do Estado não é exatamente o contrário do conceito de soberania popular.
I don't think that the people who implement these laws think that it's excessive. That's the problem. They believe that it's something that people should want to do, that it's good for society. Yes, I think it's excessive, and I think it undermines the very notions we have about or we're supposed to have about freedom in the United States. But I think that people, they won't say it out loud in the United States because we revere the founding fathers, George Washington, But, I think they view them as, antiquated and that they had antiquated ideas and that it's time to progress. Now, I agree, you want progress, but there are some core ideas that are eternal. And I think that they found some of those ideas, and we shouldn't undermine them, even if it's ugly. So, I think some of this stuff isn't very nice that they want to ban, but I still think that it should exist if people want it.
O Robson Monteiro volta à questão aqui do fumo. Ele diz que as pessoas poderiam presumir que o custo da saúde, dos cuidados de saúde para os fumantes, que se transformam, que acabam doentes, deveriam ser rebatidos, ou seja, deveriam voltar para o próprio fumante. Não seria justo que toda a sociedade assumisse o custo assumisse esse ônus, não é, de cuidar das doenças dos fumantes. Portanto, essa não seria uma forma de se controlar o cigarro muito mais do que inibindo o uso dele?
Well, yeah, But the problem is everyone's socializing medicine even more, not less. That if you individualized and we had a free market solution for healthcare, then people would be more responsible for their own actions. But the fact of the matter is, in the United States, we're in the midst of collectivizing medicine, nationalizing medicine, which gives government, then government has the right then to say we're a collective, so whatever you do affects me, and it does. So we're headed in the wrong direction. Yes, I think that that's a better idea. But even if we didn't do it, I still think that freedom is worth more than the price, because there's a lot of things we do in society that are very expensive and we allow people to do. So I don't think that that's a good enough reason to start banning it. Thirdly, and this is kind of an ugly thing to talk about, I'm not sure that it's true what people say. Yes, the cost of smoking is high when people get sick from smoking. However, when people die younger, they also alleviate some of the cost, and that's just the truth. Because we all have to die at some point, I think. So when we do that, it's usually very expensive, that last part of our lives. I know in the United States, I think it's the last 2 weeks of your life costs more on average than your whole life, keeping you alive. We have a moral imperative to do that at the end of life, and even though it's expensive, because there are certain things that we pay for. So my answer is, I agree in the concept of it, but I'm not sure that it's going to be happening very soon. I wish it was. I wish we were individualizing healthcare in that way.
O Renato Drummond pergunta se você acha que existe algum critério objetivo para que certas regulações possam ser aceitas como não arbitrárias, ou sempre que se faz uma regulação sobre determinado comportamento ou consumo é algo autoritário. Ou seja, há uma forma de embrulhar melhor a questão das regulações que afetam a vida e as escolhas? Se nós partimos do princípio de que toda regulação é autoritária, mas é necessário que se faça algum tipo de regulação, há uma maneira de fazer isso de forma que não pareça autoritária, ou todas são inevitavelmente autoritárias? Elas afetam a vida das pessoas e, por causa disso, ela não é democrática.
Well, I don't believe every legislation is authoritarian. I mean, you know, that I don't believe that to be true. I think, and even this is sort of a light. I don't think it's illegal or unconstitutional in the United States for governments to do these things. I just think that it's a bad idea, and as I laid out, I think it's corrosive over a long period of time. So, is there a better way to do it? I don't want to do it at all. I want people to be free. So I don't want a better way. I don't think there is a better way. I think that in the free market, if people were allowed to do these things, I think in the end, society would end up the same. It's like when the right wing in the United States, the religious right wing, tries to moralize. Who's the least effective organization in the United States? The government. If I wanted to moralize people, I wouldn't go to the government to do it. I'd find some kind of free market solution for it. So I think that that's another problem with all of this. The government is not effective in making these kinds of social engineering changes. So I don't think it's a good way, even if I wanted to stop people from smoking. They've been putting warning on cigarettes forever. Nobody reads the warning. They're not inventive. They're not creative about how they end these things. I think if the government took the money they spend on anti-smoking initiatives and gave it to some huge advertising firm and said, do it for us, they would do a better job in the end than the coercive tactics of government, I think. So my answer is I don't want to find a better way for them to do it.
Gostaria de saber se nos seus estudos, na sua pesquisa, você também imaginou o efeito que toda essa política americana, ou esse costume de legislar ferozmente sobre o consumo e a vida das pessoas afetou os demais países. É claro que nós aqui no Brasil, mas a gente viajando por qualquer lugar pode imaginar o quanto a questão da restrição ao fumo foi disseminada e é uma influência direta dos Estados Unidos. E se os Estados Unidos são esse país tão desenvolvido e tão avançado e adota certos comportamentos, como nós aqui não vamos fazer a mesma coisa? Se os americanos adoecem com cigarro, os não fumantes também, como que nós não vamos proteger os nossos não fumantes e não vamos condenar os nossos fumantes? E por aí afora, na questão da obesidade, ou mesmo das questões de política, como as ações afirmativas, o combate ao preconceito contra raças e tudo mais. Quer dizer, do ponto de vista de um americano, de alguém que estuda isso, como se imagina aí iluminando o mundo nessa questão que, afinal de contas, trata de controle?
You don't have to copy everything. We do only some, the good stuff. Listen, you don't play baseball here, right? You don't play hockey here. You don't play, you play soccer here. So not everything translates in the same way. And I think this is a bad idea because I think that we got the idea from the Europeans, frankly, in some way. I think they were doing this kind of thing before us, but in certain places. I think we are still a very free country. I think that you guys seem like you're a free country. You seem very social. I've only been here for a few days, but you seem very open, socially open, freedom-loving in a way, entrepreneurial, and growing. So you don't have to copy anyone. I think that everyone has a different kind of political history, a different kind of. We don't know what a dictatorship is. We never had these experiences in the United States. We have no tradition of understanding how to fight against something like that. So we have our own problems. It doesn't seem to me like this is a racist society anymore or less than the United States. So we have our own cultural problems there, and everyone deals with them differently. That's why I think it's always important to have these core belief systems that help guide you along the way of the Enlightenment, of the classical liberal. And I just took those ideas and I put them on top of the nanny state. And I do that with all the things. As I said in the beginning, it's my dogma basically, or my ideology, and I believe it, not because it's blind faith, but because it works. So I don't know enough about Brazil to talk about it in too much detail, but it seems to me that things are going very well. You're having a conference about freedom of expression. It's, just one more thing about this. People always complain in the United States lately that there's angry politics. People are angry at each other, and it's just messy, and people are in the streets, and that's good. In North Korea, there's only one party. In Cuba, there's one party. Not everything that is ugly is unhealthy. So I just wanted to say that I don't think that you have to copy that part, but there are plenty of other things you can take from us if you want. But baseball.
Às vezes não se trata exatamente de copiar, mas é uma influência tão marcante e há, evidentemente, todas as com relação a medicamentos e remédios, por exemplo, o que o FDA diz que é bom influencia diretamente toda a pesquisa, todo o consumo e todo o receituário médico. Mas o que importa, eu acho que o princípio sagrado da liberdade de expressão, que você disse que nos Estados Unidos permanecem sagrados, não estão em xeque.
I think that they're defied all the time, actually. There's the FCC, it's the Federal Communications Commission. They regulate the airwaves, they regulate what's on TV, and they've just expanded their mandate to regulate the internet. There was a thing called the Fairness Doctrine in the United States, where there was a station that had to give both sides of every issue if it talked about news, which is silly because sometimes there's 10 sides to an issue, and sometimes there's only one. Forcing people to say things is almost as bad as telling them they can't say something sometimes. As I said before, there are certain people who can't advertise on television. I think that's an infringement on their right to free speech. I think censorship on the airwaves that we have is an infringement on free speech. Not that I want cursing and all kinds of crazy stuff on TV, simply that I think that the market would decide. I wouldn't let my kids watch it and they wouldn't put that programming on. I think that we have so many choices now that there's no need for that kind of censorship anymore. And then there's political correctness, which is more subtle, but there's certain things it's very hard to talk about because everyone will call you a racist or, immigration is a very big thing in the United States, and I am an open border guy. I like immigration. I think it's good, but many people don't. But they can't even say anything because right away they're called a racist or something. So that's a subtle thing, and people should fight through it. but it's not as secret as you might think in the United States, in my opinion, especially if you're a corporation, a cigarette company, an oil company. You know, people don't like those people. People don't like those kind of companies, so they don't care if they're censored. But I think that Americans aren't always as careful as they should be about these things. But maybe I'm just sort of, because I'm in the news and I think about it more, it seems more of aggression towards me when people inhibit free speech.